G'day everyone. Well, it's now the next day after I have created my new design sump that incorporates a phytoplankton culturing chamber in the design. And I had been giving it a little bit of thought last night as to any flaws that there may be in my design. And I was thinking, well, what if the power goes off and you always get a little bit of back siphon into your sump, and I've got the overflow here, so when the phytoplankton is topped up with salt water, which basically adds to the culture and it helps it to culture some more. And I've got the overflow pipe here. I was thinking, what happens when the power goes off? You always get water siphoned down into your sump and the water level rises up, and potentially get some water running into my phytoplankton chamber, and that's the last thing I need, because I don't want tank water getting into my phytoplankton chamber. For one, the salinity is too high, because the salinity in my tank would be about 1.025, and to culture phytoplankton it's ideal to have it 1.020, so I don't want to get the salinity higher. Plus I also don't want any copepods from this main chamber, because I'm going to have my Koaleigh hopefully filling up this whole chamber and have a lot of copepods in there, especially when it's getting fed by phytoplankton. I don't want any copepods going into the phytoplankton chamber if it ever fills up when the power goes off from back siphoning. So I thought, well, I've got one of these little check valves which allows the flow to go only one way, and it fitted nice and snugly in this little bit of tubing that I put in there. So if this sump does fill up with water, I'm sure it won't go any higher than the top of the phytoplankton chamber, but I was concerned it may get as high as my drain pipe. So yeah, this check valve should prevent any backflow back into there, where water, as it fills up in the phytoplankton chamber, it'll flow out and dose the sump. But if the power goes out and there's back siphoning, it won't flow back in. So that's the little solution I found to that. And now for today, what I want to do is actually fill up the phytoplankton chamber with some water to test for any leaks. So I've got a hose here connected up to my RODI storage container. So I'll turn that on, and fingers crossed there'll be no leaks. Turn that up a little bit. move the pipe. Now let's inspect and see what's going on. And upon inspection, I do not see any leaks at all. Because the last thing I need is for water leaking into the phytoplankton chamber, and if water can get in, copepods can get in, and if I get copepods getting into my phytoplankton culture, copepods will eat phytoplankton, and it can completely consume all of the phytoplankton that's in there, and then I have to start my culture all over again. So the idea is to keep it copepod free, and I'll have to experiment as to how often I need to add some fresh salt water at 1.020 into there. I'll gauge it by, I guess, the colour of the phytoplankton, and then I'll just use the aqualifter pump to pump water into the phytoplankton chamber, and then that should then overflow the phytoplankton into the main chaeto chamber, dosing the sump. This whole system with the display refugium and the 125 gallon main display, I'm actually going to have two sumps, one sump underneath each tank. This one is just your main export, like nutrient export factory, and plus a habitat to grow a lot of copepods, and of course culturing phytoplankton to feed those copepods and have an explosion of population of copepods, which will be very beneficial to the mandarin dragnets that I am planning on getting later on down the track. So upon inspection again, I still see no water leaking, so I mean my silicon job doesn't look perfect, but it does the job, it's not leaking. So I guess the next test will be to see if my idea with the check valve actually works, to make sure that when the water level in my phytoplankton chamber rises above that drain pipe, it actually does come out the check valve. That was one concern I had, that just with natural gravity it may not come out. But, that's what testing's all about. I've got some more RODI water in a soda bottle. Try not to electrocute myself and pour it on the light. Well, I see it's leaking out from where the pipe connects there, but it's not actually coming out of the check valve. So I guess that idea, I wonder if I bleed the air out of the check valve, whether it will actually help. obviously that check valve idea is not going to work, so might have to come up with another solution. I mean, who knows, if I'm lucky, when it siphons, the water may not even get up that high. Well, that concludes today's little test. The main thing is that the water's not leaking out of the phytoplankton chamber. Might have to think of a different idea to prevent any back siphoning if the tank fills up, if the power goes out. If the water does get that high, I guess change how I got my overflow. If worst comes to worst, I'll just block that off completely and just have the water overflow from the top. But I don't really like that idea. I mean, I always, think of a different design, or if you've got any ideas yourself what I could put there, leave your comments below. But this is where it is at the moment, and tell me what you think. Leave your comments below. Like my design here, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, and I'll catch you on the next video.